Carl Jung's shadow theory and theistic Satanism, embracing the dark self for true empowerment. In the intricate tapestry of human psychology and esoteric spirituality, few concepts resonate as deeply as Carl Jung's notion of the shadow. Defined as the unconscious aspects of our psyche, those parts of ourselves that are repressed, denied, or ignored, Jung's shadow theory remains one of the most powerful tools for understanding the depths of human nature. According to Jung, the shadow contains all the things we may reject in ourselves, from socially unacceptable desires and impulses to our hidden strengths and unrealized potential. To attain wholeness, he believed, one must not only acknowledge the shadow but actively integrate it into the conscious self. In a parallel tradition, Theistic Satanism encourages practitioners to confront and embrace the darker aspects of their being through a spiritual lens. This tradition does not seek to demonize the shadow, as is common in many other religious and spiritual systems. Rather, Theistic Satanism teaches that personal power and spiritual ascension are achieved through the acceptance and integration of one's darker, primal instincts. This integration of the shadow is seen not as a destructive act but as a transformative process leading to self-realization and empowerment. Jung's shadow theory, a psychological odyssey. Carl Jung's shadow theory is foundational to his larger body of work on the human psyche. The shadow, he argued, is a part of the unconscious mind that consists of repressed weaknesses, desires, and instincts. It is a natural counterpart to the persona, the mask or public face that we wear in social interactions. While the persona conforms to societal expectations, the shadow contains what we consciously and unconsciously suppress due to moral, cultural, or societal pressures. But the shadow is not just a repository of negative or undesirable traits. In Jung's view, it also houses aspects of ourselves that could be deeply beneficial if acknowledged and integrated. Strength, creativity, spontaneity, and even wisdom can be hidden in the shadow, waiting to be brought into the light of consciousness. Jung believed that people who fail to integrate their shadow are at risk of projecting their repressed emotions onto others, leading to conflict and disharmony both internally and in their relationships. The process of integrating the shadow, called individuation, is one of Jung's central psychological goals. Individuation requires a courageous confrontation with one's darker nature, those parts of ourselves we would rather ignore or disavow. In his book The Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious, Jung explains that acknowledging the shadow is not just a matter of intellectual understanding but involves a deep emotional and spiritual reckoning. The shadow must be fully experienced to be fully integrated, a process that often involves discomfort, fear, and the dismantling of long-held beliefs about oneself. Theistic Satanism, a spiritual path to embracing the dark self. In Theistic Satanism, the process of shadow integration is not merely psychological but deeply spiritual. Practitioners of Theistic Satanism believe in the literal existence of spiritual entities, including Satan, who is viewed not as a force of evil, but as a liberator and teacher. Unlike symbolic or atheistic forms of Satanism, which often use Satan as a metaphor for human rebellion or enlightenment, Theistic Satanists engage with Satan and other dark forces through direct ritual and invocation. The central philosophy of Theistic Satanism is that the dark aspects of existence, both in the world and within oneself, are not to be feared or suppressed but explored and integrated. The dark self, which includes elements of the shadow, is seen as a source of power, insight, and personal evolution. Theistic Satanism encourages practitioners to confront their own fears, desires, and instincts through ritual and meditative practices, engaging directly with these forces rather than denying or fleeing from them. This process is seen as a path to personal and spiritual empowerment, allowing individuals to transcend the limitations imposed by society, religion, and conventional morality. This approach is distinctly different from the dualistic worldview of many mainstream religions, which often frame the battle between light and dark as one of good versus evil. Theistic Satanism, by contrast, views darkness as essential to the whole. In this tradition, the dark is not evil, but a vital counterbalance to the light, a force that, when embraced, leads to greater wisdom, autonomy, and spiritual growth. By invoking dark forces through ritual, Theistic Satanists align themselves with the power of their shadow, using it to fuel their spiritual journey. Philosophies, Carl Jung and Theistic Satanism. The convergence of Carl Jung's shadow theory and theistic Satanism is not only striking but transformative. Both traditions, in their own way, advocate for the integration of the shadow as a means of achieving wholeness. For Jung, this process is part of individuation, the lifelong journey of self-realization where the conscious and unconscious mind merge to create a more complete individual. For theistic Satanists, this journey takes on a spiritual dimension, where the integration of the dark self leads to empowerment, enlightenment, and even spiritual ascension. In A Psychology and Alchemy, Jung compares the process of individuation to the ancient practice of alchemy. Alchemists sought to transform base metals into gold, a metaphor for the transformation of the self. Similarly, in theistic Satanism, practitioners seek to transform their primal instincts, desires, and shadow elements into sources of personal strength and wisdom. Rituals that invoke dark forces or commune with demonic entities are seen as acts of self-alchemy, where the practitioner becomes both the philosopher and the stone, undergoing a profound internal transformation. This alchemical metaphor also applies to the way both traditions view the shadow. In Jungian psychology, the shadow contains not only the base or negative parts of the self, but also aspects that are necessary for personal growth. By integrating the shadow, an individual can access hidden potential and power. Theistic Satanism echoes this idea, with its emphasis on embracing the darker aspects of one's nature as a means to greater spiritual and personal empowerment. Just as the alchemist sought to refine base metals into gold, the theistic Satanist seeks to refine their shadow into a source of wisdom and strength. The path of individuation in theistic Satanism. For Jung, individuation was the key to achieving psychological wholeness. This process requires the individual to confront the shadow, not in a way that seeks to eradicate it, but to integrate it into a cohesive sense of self. Similarly, theistic Satanism offers a path to spiritual individuation. In this tradition, the individual does not seek to suppress their darker nature or submit to external moralities, but instead looks inward to find and embrace the full range of their personal desires, instincts, and powers. In both Jungian psychology and theistic Satanism, the ultimate goal is not moral purity or conformity to an external ideal. Instead, it is about becoming fully oneself, whole, complete, and powerful. The shadow is not an enemy but an ally in this journey. As Jung once said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This is a philosophy that could just as easily be found in the writings of theistic Satanists, who believe that true enlightenment and empowerment come not from denying the dark but from embracing it. Through rituals, meditation, and personal reflection, theistic Satanists engage in their own process of individuation. By calling upon dark forces and aligning themselves with the power of their shadow, they seek to transcend the limitations of the ego and the persona. In this way, theistic Satanism offers not only a spiritual path but also a psychological one, where the dark self is recognized as a source of immense personal power. Bringing it all together, a unified path of power and self-realization. At the heart of both Carl Jung's shadow theory and theistic Satanism is the idea that the shadow is a gateway to greater self-understanding and personal power. For Jung, the shadow is an integral part of the psyche, and individuation cannot occur without the conscious integration of these darker elements. In theistic Satanism, the shadow becomes a spiritual ally, a force to be harnessed and used for personal and spiritual development. The synthesis of Jungian psychology with theistic Satanism offers a powerful framework for self-realization. By embracing both the psychological and spiritual dimensions of shadow work, individuals can attain a more profound understanding of themselves and the world around them. This path is not easy. Confronting one's shadow requires courage, self-honesty, and a willingness to engage with aspects of the self that are often uncomfortable or frightening. But for those who undertake this journey, the rewards are immense: empowerment, self-awareness, and a deep connection to both the conscious and unconscious forces that shape their lives.